beautiful day. Bridge repairs. Dagnabbit. What's up, homeboy? I've got this fucking bike's number, dude. I know exactly what he's gonna do all the time, like in any situation. Let me tell you, man, it's like, as hard as I've ridden this thing, like even in the extreme heat, this thing has never once overheated on me. Watch it overheat. They're extremely solid bikes. Honestly, every bike is solid. I mean, you know, they're just, unless it's like one of those weird Chinese bikes, then there's just nothing. This one time I found an ad in the paper. It was like this guy, he was selling, it said, in the paper it said 350 dual sport. And, you know, at the time I was looking for a bike, so I figured it was like a DR 350 or something like that. It said, that's all it said, it was 350 dual sport, contact me for information. So I was like, alright, I'll go check it out. The dude, I showed up to the dude's house. He's like, yeah, it's in the shed here. He's like, you're here to see the Terminator. I thought he was joking. I was like, oh, haha, yeah, the Terminator, sure. So he takes me into his garage, and he goes in the back, and there's like this piece of shit blue Chinese dual sport. And on the side of it, it says Terminator 350. I was just like, oh my god. I'm just looking at it, I'm like, wait, this is, I'm like, oh, so like, I'm like, is this like a Yamaha with like graphics on it? He's like, no, it's a Terminator. He's like, I got it at an auction. He wanted like $800 for it. Which means he probably bought it for like $1,500, honestly. But the frame tubes were like this big. You know, it was just like really shitty construction. I sat on it, it had like no suspension. The clutch was like a fucking 40-pound clutch pull. I was just like, oh my god, this thing's such a piece of shit. But he did have he had a fucking Yamaha 350 two-stroke four-wheeler there. I don't know if those are called Banshees or if they're called Warriors, but it was like the cool one. I said, well, how much for that thing? And he goes, oh, I can't sell that, the kids take that thing trail riding. Like, alright, man, well, peace out, dude, I'll see you later. Yeah, don't buy those piece of shit Chinese bikes. They're like, there's things on them that, you know, you may be like, whoa, a Chinese bike is $1,500 and a Japanese bike is $4,000, and the Chinese bike does the exact same thing. But yeah, but those Chinese bikes, they're not safe to ride. I mean, they're like 1-year bikes at most. Now the mopeds they make are a little bit better quality because they're more like, you know, produced. People put more miles on them, but like the dirt bikes and stuff, you take any one of those off-road for like more than a day and they're gonna start falling apart. My cousin had a Chinese 110 four-wheeler. It was like a Chaoshen or some shit. I'm gonna go through the rich neighborhood. It's like a Chaoshen or some bullshit. It's an automatic 110. His dad got it at an auction for, you know, a couple $100. And it ran. I mean, it was a four-wheeler. But that's really it. You know, the suspension was shitty, the brakes were fucking awful, and like after a year, the plastics all just broke off. He didn't wreck it, he didn't roll it, the plastics were just so brittle they just started cracking and they just completely fell off. But they don't make these things, you know, to be like good quality bikes. You know, they make them for people who are on a budget so they can take a small little chunk of money out of the market. You know, they make these things for like a couple $100 at some shoddy ass factory. You know, they sell them usually like, you know, generic moped dealers will have them. They're usually genuinely a lot cheaper and everything. But if you're really looking into getting like a motorcycle, do not go with the Chinese branded one, man. They're I can't even tell you how bad they are. You'd have to really just get one and see for yourself. There's things that you may not notice, like the triple trees will just be like razor thin, which translates to really poor handling. They'll usually have drum brakes as opposed to disc brakes, which are just far less effective, much cheaper. They'll have you know, cheap metal, like pot metal on them, on the frame and the handlebars and everything else that counts. They'll be made of cheap materials so they can be sold and made cheaper. The engines might run long, for a long time. I mean, you know, if you get some proper oil and everything, but I mean, you know, you can't expect them to make a lot of power. They're not making race bikes, they're making generic knockoff bikes. You'd be lucky to get maybe like 15 horsepower out of like a 250. You know, the aftermarket is non-existent for Chinese bikes because they'll do like weird things too, where like they won't make like a solid brand. They'll make like one kind of brand for like a year. Look at that fucking house. They'll make like one kind of brand for like a year and then they'll just kind of stop. You know, you can never just like go like look in a parts catalog and like, oh, there's the Choo Choo Ching Chongs. It's like, you know, that model just doesn't exist. Very hard to find parts. You know, a lot of times whenever you're looking for oil filters for these things, you have to like just go by like a generic part number and look it up. They're not gonna, you know, use like the most modern of things, you know. What else? Safety wise, they're not going to be safe. You know, a lot of there's a little bike for sale. Look at that cute little Yamaha TTR 125. But you know, as far as safety, I mean, these things aren't going to have like throttle by wire and stuff. They're going to have cheap throttle cables, and you know, if one of the cables snaps, most likely the thing's just going to go wide open, like on a lot of older bikes. You know, because they don't care. Again, these are like 1 year bikes. You know, you're probably going to get maybe 1 year enjoyment out of them. Very low mileage, very light use. If you live in like, if you go camping or something once a year and you just want to have like a little pit bike to get around on, I mean, you could probably get away with one. But if you want to put some heavy miles on it, you want to take that thing off-road, you want to do a little bit more stuff with it, really not recommended. I mean, I wouldn't go more than 60 miles away from my house on a Chinese bike. You'll notice a lot of the Chinese market too. They'll make things like mopeds and like pit bikes especially. Just don't. You know, you can find like a CRF 50 or something like that on Craigslist for genuinely pretty cheap. You don't always have to resort to getting a new Chinese bike. If you just put like a Honda and a Chinese bike side by side, the difference is going to be night and day. You'll notice things immediately off the bat. You know, the suspension, the way the frame is, just overall fit and finish is going to be much greater on the Japanese bike. So yeah, you guys want to get into biking for cheap, just browse Craigslist, man. I promise you'll find something eventually that'll tickle your fancy. Don't resort to getting some rabies infested whore bike, you know, off the interwebs. Just get a good solid machine. Just trust me on this.